Once you have a good value model, coming up with pricing is maybe not trivial, but it's certainly much easier.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for in eBay.
I mean, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the sneaky relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and our guest today is once again the only Stephen Forth. Here are three things you want to know. Oh, no, you know everything there is to know about Stephen by now. Hey, Stephen, let's talk about AI today.
Sounds good. It's something we've been spending a lot of time on here at Ibbaka.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you say we, you mean you and your team, not me, because I almost ignore it.
Me and my team. There are some really interesting things happening.
Okay, can I give you a couple of my complaints or my thoughts about AI, and you can tell me why I'm so wrong? And then I want to hear this data you've collected and all the really cool things that are going on in AI, and what it has to do with pricing.
Yeah.
So I have two big complaints with AI and pricing, maybe three. But one is the lack of data in B2B worlds, the lack of data on value. And I don't think that's a big deal. I mean, I just think that's going to come over time. So am I wrong on that? Or is that okay to complain about?
It's okay to complain about, because by complaining about it, maybe we can get something to happen about it. So let's complain.
Okay, got it. So that's one. Number two, it feels to me that we don't have a right answer to train it with. Last time you were on the podcast, we talked about how AI could learn how to play Go from scratch. Just give me the rules. And because I know if I won or if I lost, I can figure out how to win the game eventually better than anybody. Now, in pricing, I know if somebody bought or didn't buy, but I don't know if they paid the most they were willing to pay. So I don't know the truth. How do we deal with that in AI?
So I think that part of the difference here is that my approach to setting prices starts with a value model. So if you can build a value model and validate a value model, then you can fairly easily, I believe, derive pricing from the value model. So to me, the question starts a little bit earlier. Can we build value models using AI? I'd like to take a step back here, though, because I think we need to talk about two different things.
Can you define a value model for everyone, and then we'll take that step back? I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah. So in Ibbaka's language, a value model is something like Tom Nagel's economic value estimation, or EVE. And basically, it's a set of equations that estimates the economic value of a solution for a customer, or possibly a customer segment. And then one can layer into that other models. For example, we're doing a lot of work these days with sustainability models. Now, so the sustainability equations can be an input into the value model, but the difference between the two is that the economic value model gives a dollar output, whereas the sustainability model gives an output like energy savings or reduced greenhouse gas emissions, or in the case of a couple of our customers, reduced water consumption.
Got it. Okay, so now let's take a step back.
Sure. So I think there are two different themes here. And I differentiate them as pricing AI and AI pricing. So I tend to use pricing AI to mean using AI in pricing. And AI pricing is how are we going to price all of this new functionality and we hope new value that is being created by AI-based systems. And more of Ibbaka's work is on the latter, on AI pricing, than on pricing AI. But I do have some thoughts to share about both of these.
Oh, so you're going to say I'm complaining to the wrong guy.
Not necessarily. Shall we start with pricing AI?
Sure.
So first, let's remember that the big heavy metal pricing systems, such as Pros and Vendavo and Zilliant and PriceFX, they've been using AIs for a long time. They haven't been using the new generation of transformers, which is the innovation that Google created in 2017 that is generating most of the buzz today. But AI is not new to pricing. And the complaint that I've had about AIs and pricing is that they're black boxes. So let's just say that you used your favorite price optimization engine and it suggested that the willingness to pay for some customer is 10% higher than they're currently paying. So what are you going to do? Are you going to go and say to that buyer, hey, my fancy dandy AI says that you should be willing to pay 10% more, so I'm going to increase your prices by 10%. Well, that's not going to get you very far. But one of the problems and challenges with AI is it can be hard to figure out why it's coming up with the recommendations that it does. It's a black box. And I think that is one of the big challenges for pricing AIs in B2B. It's not just the lack of data. It's the difficulty in explaining the systems, explaining how they work, why they work, and why they're giving the recommendations that they do.
Yeah, that was going to be my third complaint, by the way. But it turns out that I also asked Craig Zawada this morning. He had made a LinkedIn post this morning, and I'd asked him a question about that black box issue. And he said they're now using what they called transparent AI. Now, I don't know anything else beyond that. I'm sure it's worth looking into to see what they're doing. But they do recognize it's a problem and they're working to get around it.
Yeah. So there's a whole trend, and DARPA has funded a whole set of research into what DARPA calls XAI, explainable AI, and it's going to be pretty critical. But you can. So I'm glad that Craig and Pros are doing that, but unless the explanation helps you defend the new price point, it's still not very useful. If the explanation says that we analyzed price elasticity of demand based on a whole whack of factors, and they, based on that analysis and based on our predictive models, we predicted that WTP would be higher. Okay, fine. That explains what they did. You and I can imagine how the algorithms could work. It still doesn't help me defend my price to a buyer.
Okay, so I'm going to make a huge leap all of a sudden, and I'm going to say, gee, if we had a value model and we used AI to predict I guess I'm going to use the word coefficients, but I'm not sure that's the right word, but the importance or coefficients of each of the value drivers, then I would have much more transparency and I would be able to understand why this specific buyer should be willing to pay me more. How'd I do?
Yep, that's exactly. Thank you. I'll slip you your $20 later. That's exactly the approach that we have. But the problem that we have is that creating value models today is a highly skilled performance. Yeah, and it is a bit of a performance. There's a little bit of the magician happening in it. So I was talking to a head of pricing at a major European company, and his comment was, look, if I were to adopt this approach, I would need to build 1,000 value models to cover my portfolio and segments. Who knows, maybe 3,000. And Ibbaka certainly does not have the ability to build 1,000 value models, and I don't think McKinsey does either. So I can't go down this path. Fair enough. I don't, McKinsey maybe does have the ability to build 1,000 or 3,000 value models, in a short period of time and update them and keep them current and relevant. But it would cost you a non-trivial amount of money. And he's right. Ibbaka does not have that capacity. We could probably build at the most 100 a year today. And even that might be stretching it. So this is a real problem for Ibbaka. how do we become more scalable? And part of the issue, part of the answer could well be that we'll be able to use some combination of generative AI and mathematical AIs to dramatically shorten the time that it takes to build value models. Now, it's going to be human in the loop. I don't see that we are going to fully automate that in the next 3 years, but we should be able to, customize a language model. So transformers build things called language models, and we should be able to customize a language model based on our training and integrate mathematical AI from a place such as Wolfram Alpha to greatly scale up our ability to build value models so that we could legitimately do 1,000 a year or more. So I think that in itself would be transformative and would have a huge impact on pricing. And as I said earlier, I mean, once you have a good value model, coming up with pricing is, maybe not trivial, but it's certainly much easier. So, that's an example of pricing AI that is it's one step removed from setting the end price. And I think we're going to have, pricing is a very human thing, especially B2B pricing. So I think we are going to have human in the loop for quite some time to come. But we're going to need to leverage and take advantage of the power that pricing AIs give us to scale, to get more personal, more customized pricing, to better understand our customers. So, the impact may be a bit more indirect than direct, at least for the next couple of years.
So what's funny is I could imagine, given where AI is today, and it's actually pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of complaints and a lot of mistakes it makes, but I could imagine ChatGPT or the equivalent doing an interview with customers to find out what their problems are, what their results they were looking for were, and being able to synthesize that into the right set of value drivers. Especially if you did enough customers, you'd say, "Oh, this seems to be common across these customers," and so I could imagine that working well.
And I think we'll see that within the next 12 months. We will see that happening within the next 12 months. Everyone last week was talking about Microsoft's pricing of Copilot at $30 per user, and we should talk about that a bit later. But there was a far more important announcement last week, which was that Meta released Llama 2.0 and made it available through Hugging Face. Weird name, right? But Hugging Face is emerging as one of the most important companies in the AI ecology. And Llama is an open model so that we can train it and modify it fairly easily ourselves using some of the Hugging Face tools and environments. And I think that what we're going to find is that large companies and innovative companies and companies like Ibbaka start training their own language models for use in pricing. Now, having said that, there's still the issue that we use a lot of mathematics in pricing, and language models have real shortcomings when it comes to math because they're based on human understanding of language, which does not always map well into mathematics. But there are solutions to that emerging as well from the people I mentioned earlier, Wolfram Alpha, from iGenius, which is another sort of trending company. So this problem is going to be solved sooner rather than later. Nice.
Okay. So I should watch for Ibbaka to solve the problem of pricing AI.
We hope we're going to be one of the companies making a major contribution to it. But there are lots of people starting to work on this, and there are lots of different paths to a solution. It's going to be super exciting and fun to watch this over the next few years.
Excellent. So let's jump to the other side and talk about AI pricing, which is how these AI companies are actually doing their pricing.
Yeah, which is a really interesting question. So let's start at let's start with Microsoft, because it's gotten so much attention. And hey, its announcement that it was pricing Copilot at $30 per user, which is more expensive than many Microsoft 365 packages today, it had a tremendous impact.
So do the audience a favor and describe Copilot. I got to see it at the pros conference, but I wouldn't have known that it existed had I not been there.
Yeah. So Copilot is Microsoft's second major implementation of GPT-4. So GPT-4 is the world's largest and most sophisticated large language model, or transformer model, as they're also known. And it comes from a company called OpenAI, which is a company that Microsoft has invested billions of dollars in. And they may have ended up investing billions of dollars in a future competitor. But anyway, that's one of the things that makes the world interesting. So OpenAI has one of the world's largest and possibly, by some metrics, the world's best large language model today. There are other important ones from Google. We mentioned Meta's Llama earlier. On Hugging Face, you can go and find about 280,000 different models. So this is a large and diverse space, but GPT is a really impressive accomplishment.
And so when I think about these, I got to say, you and I think very differently, Stephen. You're thinking about the technical details of what each one is doing. And I'm sitting here going, well, who cares? And what are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
And the guys that I saw, the Microsoft folks I saw doing the Copilot demo, were essentially showing how salespeople write emails, follow up with clients. It's like the AI is doing most of the work for them. And it makes it really easy for them to do a salesperson's job, or at least parts of the job that they despise. And it keeps them in tune and in touch with their customers. And it was very impressive.
It is super impressive. And it does a lot more than that too. So it will, with a few simple instructions, it will build a presentation for you in PowerPoint. With a few simple instructions, it will reconfigure your Excel spreadsheet and give you all sorts of insights and do all sorts of analytics, including things that it might never have occurred to you to ask. So in addition to the word part of it, the writing words, it also works with spreadsheets, it works with PowerPoint, it works increasingly well with code. I don't know about you, but coding macros in Excel is one of my least favorite things to do. With Copilot, I will almost never have to code another macro. I'll tell the spreadsheet what I want it to do, and it will do it for me. This is a huge, huge productivity booster. And
are you using Copilot today?
I have the great misfortune of being a Google Workspace person. And if Google does not respond in the very near future, Ibbaka as a company may flip from Google to Microsoft. Wow. Which is what Microsoft wants, right?
Sure.
So the value to Microsoft, not just the $30 per user, although that's billions of dollars, it's the fact that they may well take market share from Google if Google does not respond very, very quickly. So
okay, and so it feels to me like $30 is nothing, given what you just said it could do. How much time it's going to save me, the productivity. Heck, I'd spend that much just to have an extra hour to go, fly an airplane or something.
Well, that's how you and I think. It's been really interesting to read through the comments and reactions online, and to look at the survey data. So Ibbaka has over the last week done a Van Westendorp survey of people. We got about 250 responses, which is not huge, but it's enough to get some insights. And it's really interesting to see how divided the world is about this. So there are a set of people, who think that paying $1 a month is excessive. And there are some people who say, I would pay $500 a month for this. And there's just a huge diversity in price acceptance for Copilot. But the super interesting thing is, when we do the analysis, the Van Westendorp recommends a price of, say, between $15 and $20. But the revenue optimizing price is around $29 or $30. And so Microsoft, I assume that they did similar analysis and that they have access to more data than we do. And they picked the revenue optimizing price, which makes good sense at this stage in the market's evolution. Because Microsoft, has great market access. They don't need to worry about having a low price to provide early market access. And they want to establish a reasonably high reference price. But remember, they have to do this across all of the different Office users. One of the other really interesting things we discovered, which surprised me, was that there is a group of people who are willing to pay significantly more than the $30, which is the revenue optimizing price, or the range suggested by Van Westendorp. So we compared business consultants, designers, and software engineers. And I won't ask you to guess, since this is your podcast. But I have asked a lot of people to guess, and almost nobody gets this right. The people with the highest willingness to pay are designers. And the lowest willingness to pay are business consultants. Now, you would think it would be the other way around. But I suspect what's happening is that there is, a lot of fear among designers that these AIs could take away a lot of their work. So there is a lot of interest and awareness of using them. And platforms like Figma have done a great job of integrating AI into Figma. So, the designers are actually ahead of us, both in fear of losing work, but also in adoption and understanding and acceptance that they're going to need to use these tools, and these tools can be incredibly valuable. And most of the people with the really high willingness to pay, I'm overstating a bit here, but many of them come from the design role.
Yep. So a couple of pricing observations from what you just told us. First off, Van Westendorp, when you get a few hundred results or a couple 150, you actually have the ability to do some market segmentation.
Yep.
So you were able to do that.
Yeah.
I usually tell people, you might hate this answer, Stephen, but I usually tell people, I want you to get 50 answers. I want you to get 50 respondents. But if you get 12, I'll bet you the answers don't change much after you get to 12. Right. So if you took the first 12 responses, I'll bet you your curves and your answers look similar, but you can't do your market segmentation with only 12.
Yeah. I think you're generally right. I didn't look at this data. I'm not a huge fan of doing Van Westendorp because I hate asking people what price they should pay. I think you don't normally, if you want to know what price someone will pay, that's one of the worst questions you can ask them. But in this case, Microsoft had already gone out and established a price, and it seemed like the right tool for the task at hand. And I do think we got some interesting responses, and it was kind of amazing to see $29, $30 pop up as the revenue maximizing price.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now the other thing that was interesting though is how many did you make sure that everybody who did the survey was using a Microsoft platform?
No, and there are differences between the Google. Just before we started this conversation, I was just comparing Google versus Microsoft, and we also asked some questions about attitude towards AI. Oh, this is the other thing that shocked me. For the overall data, the majority of people are opposed to AI and are opposed to the adoption of AI. So it's around 50%, but depending on how you cut the data, it can be as high as 60%. And I don't think I found any cut where it was lower than 40%. And the number of people who support widespread use of AI, ranges between 10% and 20%, depending on how you cut the data. And if I started cutting it too fine, the end would get too small. So, maybe designers on Google in North America would have I suspect that would be the highest group. But, my N is not large enough to really cut the data that much. So,
yeah. So count me in the majority.
Count me in the minority.
But I know you are definitely in the minority. But here's the thing. It's scary, but I'm old and I don't want to go learn something new.
Oh, come on. It's absolutely fascinating. So I think Mark, that one of my passions is poetry and writing poetry. So here's one of the things I'm doing. So I'm taking Llama 2, this new model recently released by Meta, and I'm using the tools available to me on Hugging Face, and I am training it with my own writing. And I'm doing a couple of different approaches. One is I'm actually training one model just on my writing, and then I'm adding the writing of people that really influence me a lot.
Huh.
And then I'm also taking another approach where I take an existing, much larger and richer model and augmenting it with my own writing. And this is giving me insights into my own habits and patterns of thought that I don't think I could get any other way.
I am positive this is fascinating. I'm positive. Okay, here's my question, Stephen. Can I take my first 3 books, feed them into whatever you just said, tell it what I want my 4th book to be, and it will write my 4th book for me, at least the first draft of it?
It could, yes. However, I'd suggest that it would be a boring book. And
you don't know the first 3.
Yes, I do. I've actually read them. It would be derivative, right? So I would start there. If I were you, I would absolutely do that. Or I would go and find some high school kid that wants to learn this stuff and, pay him a bit of money to do it for me. So I would absolutely do that. And I would take all of the other writing that you've done, because, you write pretty much every week, you publish something on pricing, and I would feed that in. And I would pause there, and then I would start working with it and see what sort of content it was generating. But then I would consider taking, some books that you have been very influential for you, and go beyond just sort of straight pricing, maybe some strategy books, a couple of business history books, whatever it is that has really helped you grow and think and learn, and train them on that as well. So I would look beyond just myself for influences, because that's how our brains work, right? We bring in other things. And, I can assure you that many people are starting to do this.
I would feel so much like a cheater if I did that.
Why? It's working on your own thoughts and your own ideas.
I don't know. Writing is like, I don't know. It's a personal thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what you'll find is that it turns into a conversation between you and this alter you. So, I think, part of the art of using these AIs is how you ask them questions, how you frame up the question for them. And this is referred to these days as prompt engineering. And prompt engineering, in order to get useful information from AIs, is going to be incredibly important, and it requires a lot of domain knowledge. So people who really understand pricing are going to actually be at a huge advantage when it comes to using AIs for pricing because, let's face it, one of the biggest skills that you and I have is we know what questions to ask.
And the other funny thing is when you use the word pricing in most worlds, it has a million meanings, right? And it shows up everywhere. And so you can't ask a simple pricing question of ChatGPT and get a good answer.
That's right. And there are several reasons for that, right? One is it's being trained too generically. So augmenting one of these models with stuff that's specific to training is going to be very powerful. And secondly, most people don't know how to do the prompts. There's lots of articles out there that says, I asked ChatGPT XYZ and look at the dumb answer it gave me. And, you ask dumb questions, you get dumb answers. I'm not impressed.
So it's kind of like when we used to be good at writing Google search prompts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you had to be trained to do that.
Yeah, it's that on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a super interesting new world. But, coming back to how our AI is going to be priced, one thing that I'm noticing, so, if you look at Microsoft, $30 per person per user, that's about the same as the whole Microsoft suite is priced at. So basically what they're saying is, AI, Copilot is worth just as much as Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and all those other things put together. But it's not just Microsoft that's saying that. If you look at, there's a company called Notion AI that's gotten super popular in the project management space. Same thing there. Notion AI costs the same as Notion. And I'm seeing this quite a bit, that people are, charging as much for the AI as they are for all of their other technology.
Okay, I'm going to give you a pricing explanation for that. You can accept it or not. You've probably heard me talk about will I and which one a lot. Mm-hmm. And Copilot for Microsoft is a will I decision because people are not going to switch off the Microsoft platform. And so they're saying, am I going to get this AI add-on or not? And so there is no competitive alternative. Mm-hmm. Do I want this capability? And so I could easily see how they get away with that, where if you're trying to sell Excel or Word or PowerPoint, you're up against the Google equivalents of each one of those, which are absolutely free at this point in time for most of us. So I could see how they could get away with that, or they could even get away with more.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a very, very accurate analysis. So, right now for Microsoft, Copilot is a will I question. It's not a which one. Yep.
Stephen, I just noticed we're over time already.
And we didn't even get to talk about how GPT prices GPT, but we'll talk about that next time.
We'll talk about that next time. Thank you very much for your time today. Just so everybody can remember, how can they get a hold of you if they want to?
Easiest way is by email, steven@ibbaka.com. I am also super easy to find on LinkedIn. And I promise I will respond to your LinkedIn message as long as you are not trying to sell me lead generation services or IT services.
Oh, you don't get web services sold to you either?
Web services. Yeah. I must get 10 of each of those a day.
I know, it's insane. All right. To our listeners, thank you so much for your time. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? You can get instructions at ratethispodcast.com/impact pricing. And if you have any questions or comments about this podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, Mark, at impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.